Mm. All right. Hello. So, welcome to the final meeting of uh, the transformation program and the embodied eating webinars. So, today we're going to review some of the most important practices for these past several months. And I also want to give you a plan for how to move forward, and that's going to be individualized for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint presentation. And we will play from the start. Okay. There. All right. So this is our 12th meeting. So we have been talking about mindful eating, about lifestyle practices, about how to work with our internal dialogue around food, and about how to work with some of the emotions that underlie our tendency to overeat. And so we're going to review some of those today. So to begin with, I want to review the nuts and bolts of eating. And so the three parts of this are to develop a food plan and, excuse me, you can do this using information that's already available to you. You can go to the USDA website. There are a ton of books, like whether you are leaning towards vegetarianism, towards paleo, towards whatever. You can get a book. Or what I usually suggest is that you see a nutritionist. And I know some of you have been seeing the nutritionist here at Seva, and she really helps you to find foods that work for your body and for the type of diet that you want to have. So that's the first piece, is developing a food plan. Second piece is that no matter what that food plan is, it should be based on the 4 pillars of healthy eating. And we will go over those in a minute. And thirdly, and I've been saying this all along, even if you overeat, even if you need to lose 100 pounds, no matter what, avoid restricting. So especially after you overeat, avoid restricting. It puts your body into starvation mode, and that kicks up our desire to eat, and it decreases our ability to lose weight. If you want to lose weight more rapidly than you are, again, work with a nutritionist to cut intake, starting off maybe 1 day a week, cutting intake and seeing how that works. But working with someone to help you reduce intake in a way that works for you, so that you don't get stuck in that dieting, overeating cycle, because that cycle is most unhealthy for you. I would rather have you stay at the weight you're at now and be stable where you're at now than go up, down, up, down, up, down. You know, if you're stable for 3 months and then lose a couple pounds, that would be great. It's better than losing 10 pounds, gaining 7. It's just much better for the body. So always avoid restricting, avoid putting your body in deprivation mode, because that's a real thing and it very strongly triggers overeating. Okay. So the 4 pillars of overeating I've included in this slide. So the first one is you're going to eat to reduce inflammation. Second one is you're going to eat to stabilize blood sugar levels. Third is to eat mostly whole foods. And fourth is to eat mostly plants. And as you may remember, I like 2 quotes from Michael Pollan, who has moved away from journalism around food, but he has a couple of just pragmatic, true quotes. Don't eat anything your great grandma wouldn't recognize as food. So that gets to the whole foods and the plants, and by necessity will reduce inflammation and blood sugar. And then the second quote is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. All right. So in terms of, actually we'll come back to this in a second. So that first pillar is eating to reduce inflammation. And we've been through this before. In the US, we eat foods that contribute to inflammation. And these are processed foods, sort of fake fat foods. And when we eat these foods, the inflammation that is associated with these foods is a contributor to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and obesity. And we can reduce inflammation with diet and as well with supplements. And if you're going to work with supplements, I suggest you work with a functional physician or a functional nurse practitioner. And here at SAVA, we have Kathy Devine, who is a functional nurse practitioner, and working with a lot of different supplements, antioxidants. You can reduce inflammation. So increasing whole foods, berries, citrus, and so the citrus contains antioxidants, which is going to reduce inflammation. Having salmon, cod, or sardines is going to increase omega-3s, which can also be a supplement to reduce inflammation. Nuts and seeds also have this omega-3 and healthy fat in them. Fruits and vegetables reduce inflammation, and especially cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, things like that. And then, of course, we want to reduce processed foods, so trans fat, saturated fat, and then processed grains and sugar. All right, the second pillar is eating for blood sugar balance. And this also becomes important with inflammation, and it's also important in its own right for pre-diabetes, obesity, heart disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and cancer. I had a sugar low yesterday, and I was definitely feeling fatigued and jittery. And as soon as I ate, about 10 minutes later, I just felt so much more even keeled. So it just makes you feel better when your blood sugar stays more stable and balanced. And so again, for most of us, in terms of managing blood sugar, it's about not getting too high with the blood sugar imbalance, and that leads to the beginning of insulin resistance. And in order to keep the blood sugar levels more stable, again, eating less processed food, more complex carbohydrates, fiber, which is going to slow the absorption of the sugars and make it so you don't get such a strong spike of blood sugar levels, avoiding artificial sweeteners. Daily movement helps to manage blood sugar levels. And then some things like black tea, cinnamon, fenugreek, and glucose support by pure encapsulations can help manage blood sugar levels. That third pillar, same thing, right? Eating whole foods. So reduce processed sugar and flour. It helps us to avoid excess sodium intake, and it helps us to avoid trans fats and these fake foods. And again, in eating these whole foods, it helps us to get that fiber, which is important for slowing the sugar absorption. It helps us to keep good gut or good bacteria in our gut, which helps to keep inflammation reduced. In addition, fermented food can help manage the gut bacteria. And there's something about the whole food item, as opposed to just, taking supplements and eating processed foods, that is synergistically more healthful for us than having them separated. All right. And of course, that fourth pillar is to eat mostly plants. And again, similar reasons to eat mostly plants. We get those healthy fats, the whole grains, the omega-3s, the fiber, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytochemicals, and antioxidants. And I won't go through these compounds here, but recently here are some of the compounds that scientists have found in plants. And we live in a symbiotic relationship with plants and whole foods. We have been co-evolving over years, generations, eons, for a long, long time. And when we eat food products away from the food, we are missing some of those parts of the plant that are necessary for our optimal health. And scientists are really just beginning to define what those chemicals and missing pieces are. So these are the 4 pillars of health. And what I suggest, and what I suggest you continue to do, is to move your diet slowly, maybe 1 food a week, moving from heavily processed foods to less processed foods. Pay attention to those foods that give you the most problems. They might be the foods that you overeat on the most, or they might be the foods that leave you feeling the crappiest. And begin to reduce the amount that you have and find a beautiful substitution. And so I would suggest that you continue with this mindful substitution over the course of your life. I mean, because your needs are going to be changing, and as your body's needs change, what you put in your body and how much you put in your body will also change. All right, so now I want to go back to this flexible daily routine. And you'll get your specific food plan from paleo books or vegetarian books or, easy healthy meal books. But this is what you want your overall daily routine to look like. And it's important to have consistency because our body thrives with this. It's crucial to identify a daily routine and a daily food plan, because you will get off track and you need that daily food plan as your baseline to come back to. So if you haven't figured out a daily food plan yet, that's something you need to do. All right. So you were either going to eat 3 meals a day plus snacks if you have more than 5 hours between a meal, or you're going to eat 5 to 6 smaller meals per day. And if you're having that 3 meals a day in the morning, first thing you're going to do is connect with your body, whether it's with movement or meditation or music. And after you connect with your body, you'll have breakfast. Midday is lunch, right? After lunch, taking 5 minutes to sit and appreciate some stillness, and then some gentle movement for 5 to 10 minutes. And then in evening, once you get home, taking time to transition out of work mode or out of day mode, and taking the time to prepare yourself a supper. And then if you're following this 3 meals a day between meals, if it's been more than 3 hours since the last time you ate and you're noticing hunger, definitely have a snack. If you notice fatigue and you're wanting to eat to push yourself, try some restorative yoga or some relaxation for a few minutes. And also, of course, remember to drink plenty of water. So this is a good baseline routine. And if you have your meals with those 4 pillars in mind, you're moving towards health. And remember, when we goof up, because we will, you return to this baseline. All right. So the second tool we've learned in this program is the mindful eating tool. So we have the basic mindful eating exercise, the hunger and satiety scale, and this helps you to determine when it's time to eat and when it's time to stop. The taste satisfaction scale, which helps you to eat for pleasure, comfort in a healthy way. And the surfing the urge or cravings, which helps us to identify cravings and learn how to sit through them. All right. So the basic mindful eating exercise is a practice that you can do formally once a week, and you can play around with it. You can do this mindful eating exercise informally every time you sit down for a meal, right? So taking a bit of time to tune in, notice your hunger, notice the sensations when you eat, and eat. At the very least, you can tune in and realize that you don't have time to eat mindfully and quickly chow down and get back to whatever you're doing. But being conscious about whatever choice you make. So we'll practice that mindful eating exercise now. So taking 4 small bits or pieces of a food item, placing it in front of you, tuning in by closing your eyes, paying attention to your breath, and just notice what's happening in your body and your thoughts. And then with this awareness, open your eyes and pick up your first piece of food, and getting curious about it, about how good it looks, its texture, the color, how it smells. And then placing the food in your mouth and slowly chewing it and noticing the flavors that are released. And then once it's thoroughly chewed, swallowing the food item And then taking a breath and just noticing what's left in terms of sensation in your mouth, perhaps the absence of sensation. And then turn your awareness back in to see if you want to continue eating. And then continue to mindfully eat the other 3 pieces of food. And just note how slowing down and tuning in increases your awareness. It increases your awareness of how the food tastes and looks. So if the food is delicious, it will increase the satisfaction and pleasure of the food. If you're particularly hungry, that will increase the satisfaction that you're getting out of the food. If the food is overly sweet or there's some aspect of texture that you don't like, you may heighten that experience. And just like you might be more mindful of the way the food tastes in your mouth, you might also become mindful of other experiences that your body is having. Perhaps you're noticing an ache when you eat. Perhaps you're also sad and you're noticing you're wanting to crunch something pretty intensely if you're angry. Perhaps you're noticing the desire to eat for comfort. So just noticing all of the input that's coming in. And with this information, you can make smart choices about how you want to deal with this input, rather than just mindlessly eating. All right. The next piece that's really important is this hunger scale. And it's nice to use this hunger scale to determine when you're hungry and when you're full. And when you're hungry, when it's a good idea to start eating, and when you're full, when it's a good idea to stop eating. So 1 is your body is satiated and satisfied, and 10 is you're ravenous and hungry. And actually yesterday, I probably got up to an 8 or 9 where I was hangry and just irritable and pretty tired. And I wasn't aware that it was due to hunger. And so I finally had supper already, sat down and ate. And, about 10 minutes into the meal, all of a sudden, I just felt refreshed. I had a sense of well-being. I knew I could handle my kids for the rest of the evening. Whereas 15 minutes before, I was wondering how I was going to get through these next several years with teens. So really becoming clear what overly hungry looks like for you, what just enough hunger, like I probably should have eaten when I was at a 6, but I didn't realize how light my lunch was, and I got overly hungry. So often eating when we're at a 6, when we're noticing hunger grow over the course of several hours, and then knowing to stop when our body feels satisfied. So as we become conscious of hunger, we'll see how those hunger symptoms manifest in us. So clearly, I get hangry, or hungry and angry. Other people become preoccupied with food. It's often common to have that low energy, that irritability, lightheaded, stomach growling. And most importantly, the hunger usually grows gradually over the course of several hours. And it's easy to tell when you've hit full and when you're satisfied. Like, I just noticed it almost immediately last night. I think as soon as my blood sugar levels evened out. I just felt so much better. And then I was really ready to stop eating because I was satisfied. All right. So this idea of body satiety, it's not as tangible as hunger signals, but you really have a sense of it. So it's a sense of energy and well-being that sets in as the blood sugar rises and other biological shifts occur. It starts to happen pretty quickly as the food is slowly digested, and it's much more easily experienced after a large meal, like after about 20 minutes. And body satiety can be quite strong even as fullness is diminishing. And I definitely experienced that last night. So after I ate my supper, I was just satisfied. And even as the physical fullness in my belly diminished, I still felt satisfied. All right. So we also talked about eating food for pleasure and comfort, and ways to move away from eating food as a distraction, to sedate ourselves, or as punishment. And we talked about, in terms of pleasure, adding foods that we really enjoy back on the menu. And we talked about eating them mindfully so we are truly enjoying them and not eating them without being aware of it. And in comfort, we talk about addressing our true needs or eating a small amount of the comforting food with a sense of awareness. So the question is, how do you do this? How do you eat food for pleasure and for comfort? Well, you do it occasionally because you don't want to deprive yourself. You want to be able to take pleasure in food. And you eat small amounts while being mindfully aware that you're eating it. So we use this taste satiety scale. And so when we're eating foods for pleasure, like chocolate per se, that doesn't have a lot of nutritive value and we're not eating it as a meal, you'll eat it when you're somewhat hungry, and the first several bites, it'll be very pleasurable, right? And then after you've had several bites, it'll be enjoyable. And then you'll get used to the taste. And then pretty soon you won't be tasting it anymore. And so using this taste satiety scale to help us know when to stop eating foods that we're eating for pleasure and or comfort, right? So once you stop tasting it, either once it's neutral or you're not tasting it, you stop eating the food, and you can eat it, if you've got leftovers, eat it the next night when you're able to enjoy it again. So using that taste satiety scale to help us eat foods that we normally eat for pleasure or comfort. All right. So it helps us to know when we should stop eating. It helps us, like sometimes we like the idea of a food, but when we really tune into it, we realize that it's not very satisfying. Like if we do that mindful choice exercise where we take two similar food items and taste between them, we might see that we normally eat, I don't know, ho-hos or something because they're cheap and they're quick and we can shove them in. But that actually when we slow down and taste it, it doesn't taste good. And then actually what tastes really good is a square of high-end chocolate. So it helps us to stop eating foods that we don't like, and it helps us to stop chasing the flavor or the memory of a flavor. Once we stop tasting it, we stop, and we know we can always come back the next night or next week. And it's a really powerful tool to help us gain mastery over food. Well, over tempting foods and over food in general. All right. The third piece to be aware of is to start identifying the difference between hunger and cravings. Sometimes with cravings, we may choose to indulge, and if we do so, using that taste satisfaction. Other times, we may choose to sit through it. And remember, the biggest way to identify a craving is if you haven't noticed, you know you're not hungry. You've eaten an hour before. You're not feeling any hunger pangs. You're like at a 2 on the hunger scale. And like 3 minutes later, like all of a sudden you have to eat food. It's that quick transition to a desire to eat. And we can often link, to what triggers the craving. It might be the smell of food. It might be an emotion. It could be the sight of food or a commercial. So identifying hungers versus cravings. And then we learned how to work with cravings. If the craving is low, to practice that surf the urge meditation. If it's a little bit higher, distracting yourself for 10 minutes. And then after those 10 minutes, 1 to 10 minutes coming back and seeing if the craving has passed. And if the craving is really strong and you don't want to indulge, change your environment or do the opposite. All right. So I'm not, well, in terms of this surfing the urge, I will take us through a brief meditation that has a surfing the urge component. And you'll get the idea of how it works. So making yourself comfortable, turn your awareness inwards. And if it feels okay, close your eyes. And notice if you have any desire to eat or any food cravings. You might notice a growling in the stomach, thoughts of wanting to eat, thoughts of food making it better. And identify how strong your craving for food is. 1, there is no craving to eat right now. 2, 3, 4, there are mild thoughts of wanting to eat, but it passes quickly. And higher, there's a really strong desire to eat specific foods right now. And so just giving it a number, anywhere between 1 and 10. And just noticing how you feel, how you experience this sensation of craving, the thoughts, the emotions, and the body sensations that go with it. And not trying to push those sensations away, just letting them be there. And turn your awareness to your breath. Feel the cool air enter your nostrils as you inhale, and the warmer air exit your nostrils as you exhale. And keeping your attention at the breath for the next several rounds of breathing. Noticing the rise of the breath on the inhale, the lifting of the chest and the belly, and then the fall of the breath on the exhale. Chest deflates, stomach pulls in. Just that back and forth, the rise and the fall. And knowing that just as The breath has a rhythm to it, a rise and a fall. The breath has a cadence to it. Craving also has a rhythm and cadence to it. It often intensifies and crests and then slowly recedes. And the length of a craving is usually about 20 minutes. So knowing that it will pass, whether you choose to eat or not, just like the breath comes in and goes, same thing with the craving. And so just returning the attention to the breath, watching the breath rise and fall, even as you might be aware of other sensations related to the craving or other body sensations or other thoughts in the background. And then consciously return your awareness to the experience of craving. Noticing any physical sensations like the stomach growling or salivating. Noticing any thoughts related to the desire to eat. And notice any urge to get food and to eat. And again, scale your craving on a scale of 1 to 10. And take a moment to notice any differences in the intensity of the craving and in the frequency of how often the craving is experienced. And we've been doing this for several minutes. If there's any craving there, the experience of it will have shifted. It will not be the same. It may be stronger, but it's not going to be the same as it was a few minutes ago. So really tuning in to the shift that's happened and really allowing yourself to deeply experience that the craving shifts and changes and passes, whether or not we act on it. And so making a conscious choice to continue to be mindfully aware of your experience as you move forward out of this meditation, or your conscious choice to mindfully be aware of making the choice to eat, to indulge in this craving. And regardless of what you choose, name to yourself why you're choosing to refrain from eating, or name for yourself why you're choosing to eat. All right, so that is a basic surfing the urge meditation, and it is helpful with cravings for eating, and it's actually helpful for cravings for drinking or other behavior choices, and it's also useful for intense emotions, and it's even useful for chronic pain because it helps us to get out of our rote knee-jerk response. It helps us to be conscious about our choice. And I think in one session, I hope I said this in one session, there's a quote by Viktor Frankl, is that there's power in that space between stimulus, and the stimulus is the desire to eat, or the emotion and response. So there's power in that space between stimulus and response. And in that power lies our freedom, because we have the freedom to choose and to grow and to change. So really slowing it down, noticing what's being activated in you, and consciously choosing eat, not eat, cry, not cry, that type of thing. All right. So the third aspect of these webinars has been lifestyle tools, and specifically utilizing lifestyle behaviors that promote stress management, self-compassion, and resilience. So 1 week we looked at several domains of self-care. So relationships and community, mind-body connection, spirit and soul, that daily rhythm and balance, movement, food, environment. So this would be a well-rounded set of behaviors around this self-care or nourishing principle. And then this would be one that's out of balance. And so we use some tools to help see where we needed to grow. Some behaviors, and the purpose of it is of growing these behaviors is nicely summarized by Janine Roth. And she says freedom from obsession. So freedom from obsession about food or weight. It's not about something you do. It's about knowing who you are. It's about recognizing what sustains you and what exhausts you. If we are going to refrain from overutilizing food, we have to grow other areas that sustain and nourish us. This is crucial. You cannot change your diet if you don't change your lifestyle. Okay, so this is where your optimal self-care plan is going to come in. And so I filled this out the way I typically work. And so what you're going to do is you're going to get a blank copy of this and you're going to fill it out for yourself. And every quarter, or at least once a year, you're going to go back to this self-care plan and you're going to see what shifted. Because again, it will shift. Things are going to drop off because you haven't been wanting to do them, and things are going to drop off because they've needed to drop off. And then when you come back to it, it's a time for you to reassess and re-engage and get back on track. So determining, when you're at your best, how many times a day do you sit down to eat meals? How many times a week are you getting adequate sleep? How often do you engage in a bedtime routine? Taking breaks at work, etc. So really really clearly, concretely, numerically identifying what is involved in your self-care plan, and then using this as a tool later, not to beat yourself up, but to assess if, one, you've chosen the right plan, because who knows, maybe you've undershot, maybe you realize crap, I'm not preparing enough meals. I need to take more time to do that. So it's a way to assess, like, if what you've chosen is good. And if it's chosen, it becomes your optimal self-care plan that you can go back to periodically and make sure that you're on track with. And like I said, once a quarter, or at the very least once a year, checking in with this. I do it at New Year's. I do it in spring and fall because those are good transition times. I often transition my diet to lighter foods in spring and warmer foods in fall. So it's a good time for me to kind of retool or tweak my diet and self-care plan. All right. The other piece is the self-compassion and stress management. Most of us overdo things and tend to be very critical of ourselves. So we've done several loving kindness types of meditation, and especially when you're feeling depleted. And I would say at least once a month, do that loving kindness body scan where you bring your awareness to your breath and you imagine like kindness and warmth radiating from your hands, kindness, warmth, energy, healing, and just bringing that energy to every part of your body. And bringing love and compassion, especially to those body parts that we're typically critical of. And it takes time to do this meditation, maybe 10 minutes, but just notice what it feels like when you're able to consistently do this. Notice the shift that begins to happen, the shift of how you relate to your body. So this, for me, is a very important tool for self-compassion and restoration. And of course, we have practices that help us to take care of ourselves when we're feeling restless or stressed. You know, we have some breath work we can do. That lion's breath, the breath of joy, where your arms sweep up and back, inhale and exhale. Both of those breath works, both of those types of breath help with high energy states and help to bring us down. Aromatherapy, some cooling, grounding yoga, learning how to say no, get enough sleep. And then when we have energy that's, too low, things that open up our heart, opening up the front side of the body, inversions can be restorative. So beginning to bring energy and lymph back to the center of the body. And so when we are in this space of stress management, and this is also moving to resilience and to emotion management, really figuring out what are the best tools to help me to respond to this restlessness. Instead of eating to make us feel heavy, what if I tried this yoga? What if I tried this breath? Instead of eating to give me more energy, what if I use one of these tools instead? All right. And again, coming back to a different coming back to a different way of utilizing loving kindness. May I be happy, may I be well, may I be at ease. It's just a simple loving kindness meditation that we can repeat to ourselves morning and evening. And this simple meditation, can be done daily for long periods of time. And again, noticing what happens when we wake up to 18 rounds of may I be well, may I be happy, may I be at ease. When we fall asleep, of repetition of this, how does it shift us? All right. And so some of that, the limbic response and that emotional self, the limbic response and the loving kindness also fit into this emotional self-care. In this area, though, I specifically put more working with thoughts and negative beliefs. So we have this piece of that we opened up with, like our internal response to food there. And many of us have an inner dieter, which can be pretty rigid, demanding, and critical. And this is often polarized. I wouldn't even say often. This is polarized with our inner overeater. That can be pessimistic, numb, angry, and entitled. And part of our job is to mediate from our wise self in between these two. And a few weeks ago, I sent out a link and showed a video of one woman who was talking to, her inner little kid who wanted her to overeat. And she was working with that part. And then many of us also have this rigid internal dieter where if we get up, it gets really, really negative, which ends up hurting us. And so working with this negative, demanding internal voice to help it become more useful. Setting its ability to focus and set goals in a direction that's useful, as opposed to like calling us a piece of crap and telling us we're never gonna get anything done. And so when we can separate and not take this dieter as the truth or the overeater as the truth, and we can attend to them compassionately with authority, it often shifts our ability to feel more empowered and have control over our food. So remember, the more you diet, the more you restrict, the more likely you're to flip into overeating. And the goal is to get this inner overeater and inner dieter, for both of them to be less extreme. So it's going to mean the dieter allowing us to eat some foods that we enjoy. And it's going to mean that we attend to this overeater who wants us to eat over our emotions, and show that overeating part that we can attend to our emotions in other ways, so we're not overeating as much. And then eventually we move to this middle point where we're eating to satisfy hunger, and we attend to our emotional needs directly. All right, so another piece that many of us have are internalized beliefs about what it means to be a certain way. And these internalized beliefs are, part of that internal diet. Being fat is bad, you're disgusting. So taking time to identify what our hurtful beliefs are and how we can notice them and begin to help them become less extreme and begin to shift them. And so some simple things to do, if we have some old beliefs, would be to perform a ritual. And when I do this webinar in person, I actually have people write on a scale what their negative beliefs are, and then we pound the scale. We can do yoga with a focus of shaking off those negative beliefs. And then we can do a daily mantra, not to get rid of those old beliefs, but to reinforce with repetition something that's more positive and true. All right. So that's working with negative beliefs. Another way to work with negative beliefs, specifically in regards to food and diet and self-worth, is with connection with others, whether it's Overeaters Anonymous, Al-Anon, a church or meditation group. That can really be helpful. And connecting to ourselves. So, not denying, oh my gosh, I think that my big stomach shows that I'm undisciplined. I think big stomachs, there's a part of me that believes big stomachs mean I'm undisciplined. So really allowing yourself to hear that inner critical, dieter voice or food police voice, and taking a moment to say, I appreciate your underlying intention to protect me. You don't want me to feel bad. And then showing that critical voice that indeed you can take care of its true need. I am not undisciplined. Look at what I do. It has nothing to do with the fat on my belly. Taking care of its true need rather than believing the content of what it says. So I'll often use an example of, for those of you who've had children, when they're 2 or something and they're on the floor and they're throwing a temper tantrum and saying, I hate you. If you don't let me play with this, I'm going to run away. And you're like, oh man, Jimmy's really upset. He didn't get his nap today. And then you help the child to calm down and take a nap. It's the same thing with these parts of ourselves. It's not pushing them away, and it's not believing the content either. The content of what they say isn't the truth. It's listening to the underlying message. And so it takes some wisdom to do that. All right. And so I included these, and we're not going to go over them because we're running out of time. But, I included some examples of how to work with that inner dieter and drill sergeant. And with that inner avoider or overeater, ways to deal with them a little bit more directly. Whoops. And I included this piece as well. So if we're starting to release old beliefs and behaviors, imagining what it would be like if if you release this old belief, how would your life look different? And that can help us to move forward. All right. And then the final piece is to recover from slips, because we are going to have slips. We're going to gain a little bit of weight. We're going to eat too much at a party. And it's really easy to like get triggered into that dieting, overeating cycle again, or to say, forget it, I'm just going to overeat. But getting back on track as soon as possible is part of recovery. So remembering, when you do have an episode of overeating, you can do this overeating analysis where you identify the overeating incident and work backwards to explore what happened right before for like the past 2 to 5 days. And you include internal triggers and external triggers, and you're going to include some of your own thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. And these are examples of, some emotions that you might have felt over the past couple of days, some thoughts that you might have had, some behaviors. And then as you're going through like the triggers, you can think about alternatives for the next time. Instead of having cupcakes on the counter, you can put them downstairs. When you see other people eating, you can try a mini meditation. So the next time you're going to be at an event where people are eating, you can do a little mini meditation before. You can work with the thoughts. You can work with the emotions. Instead of overeating because I'm sad, what if I let myself feel that sadness for 5 minutes and had a lot of compassion on myself? What if I went to my partner for support? Physical sensations, fatigue. What if I went back to that page on the limbic response with the low energy and did some restorative yoga, took a break? What if I do a hunger fullness scan to see if I'm really hungry or if I'm fatigued? All right. And then finally, the last tool is if we find ourselves slowly gaining weight. Oh boy, this did not turn out so great, did it? Go back to writing down your food, what you eat, when you eat it, how much, whether it's whole or processed, and any thoughts or emotions going with it. And using that tool is going to force us to become more mindful and force us to see more clearly about what we're doing. So yeah, this writing the food down isn't forever. It's just to get us back on track. So the other tool that we could use to get us back on track would be to broaden our definition of what success is. If we really find ourselves slipping back in terms of eating, like, okay, well, maybe I need to come back to this mindful eating skill set. And just realizing, like, you might not be able to right now change your food behavior, but you can notice more often when you're physically hungry. You can notice one time I did stop eating when I wasn't tasting the food so much, and just slowly, over the course of weeks, getting better and better with this, and noticing that as you continue to get better with this, the food finally flips back around. All right, so I think this is what I want. Is this what I want? I don't think that's exactly what I wanted. All right, I think that's what I want right there. There. Okay, so you have these areas, the nuts and bolts of eating, right? The tools for like lifestyle, right? The emotional piece, attending to those emotions. And then you also have like the attending to the thoughts and the behaviors. And so together, these pieces help us to live a fuller life and help us to live a healthier life and a more satisfying life. And knowing that that food and eating is like a bellwether, and it's never going to be perfect. So allowing yourself to make mistakes and having compassion on yourself and getting back on track. That's part of the big picture. So feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. And please use the meditations and the food plan and the lifestyle awareness. All right. Wishing you continued embodied eating as you move forward and embodied living. All right. Thank you.